Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about the different types of archaeologist jobs that exist mostly in the UK, although they are broadly applicable in some ways to other countries as well. Surprise, surprise, there are lots of different types of jobs where you can call yourself an archaeologist. They're not all the same. Some of them have different requirements than others, and sometimes they mix together in terms of you can start off working in one and then end up working in another, blah, blah, blah. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I've tried to kind of cover what I would consider to be the 5 kind of main types of archaeologist jobs in the UK, and that is the commercial/professional sector, local authorities and heritage bodies, community engagement, academia, and museums. I've previously talked about the difference between like commercial and academic archaeology, and as well the different type of roles that you can do in a commercial archaeology company. Those are 2 separate videos which are linked both here and in the description box below. I will be referencing throughout this video something that's called Profiling the Profession, which is a report that gets published every decade or so that is based upon a survey that's sent around to all the archaeologists in the UK for them to fill out to generate some data on the profession and on archaeology as a whole in the UK. This report is freely available on the internet, and I'm using it today kind of to just look at statistics of how many people are working in each of these different areas. But there's a lot more information about archaeologists in the UK in that report, and if you're interested in reading it or looking at it, there is a link to that in the description box below as well. Please support my channel by watching the first 5 minutes of this video, watching any of my other videos, watching an ad, or subscribing and hitting the bell notification so you get notified whenever I put out new videos. Some of the jobs that I'm talking about today will not necessarily expect you to have a degree in archaeology to work in them. Some of them will you expect to have at least 1 degree, and a couple of them do expect you to have more than 1. So I'm talking about like masters and PhDs, but I will cover that in the different areas that I'm talking about. Okay, let's dig in. We're gonna start with the world and the job that I know best, which is professional/commercial archaeology. And in case you haven't watched any of my myriad of other videos on this topic, commercial archaeologists are people who get hired to go and excavate sites across the country, usually as a part of the construction industry and development when they're building new things. And they work on projects excavating and recording archaeological sites that then get written up into reports and sometimes publications. You can become a professional archaeologist without a university degree, and in fact they are developing several alternate pathways into professional archaeology, like apprenticeships and stuff like that at the moment. But I will say that about 70% of the people working in professional archaeology do have a university degree, at least one, like an undergraduate, according to the Profiling the Profession report. The majority of the people working in archaeology in the UK at the moment are professional/commercial archaeologists. Out of the 6,300 people that filled out the survey that generated the report, 4,300 of them identify as working in professional/commercial archaeology. It has quite a wide pay range. Out of all of these jobs, people at the beginning of their career tend to make somewhere between 20 to 21,000 pounds a year, and then you can progress up to making between 30 and 40,000 pounds a year as a project manager, and then it does go above that for directors. The 2 things that you will need to really climb the ladder in professional archaeology will be experience digging. The more of that you have, the more valuable you are to companies, and a driver's license, which I will never stop harping on people to get if they want to get promoted. People often move between companies and sites, and the job involves a lot of travel and time away from home, working outdoors, so it can be quite demanding in that respect. And a lot of the time when you start out, you work on temporary contracts, so job security isn't the greatest for the first couple years. That being said, there is currently a shortage of professional archaeologists in the UK, and companies are absolutely desperate to hire people. So if you were thinking of maybe doing a career change or studying this at university, or you're just about to finish and you're not quite sure what to do, I would recommend trying out professional/commercial archaeology for a couple months and see how you like it. You get field experience, you get paid, and a lot of the time people use it to gain necessary field experience before they leapfrog into some of these other jobs that I'm going to mention. There is a kind of like subsection of commercial/professional archaeology, which is consultancy. Consultant archaeologists often work with developers on their plans for their development, helping to inform and manage their archaeological projects. People do move quite regularly between commercial and consultant work. People who start out as commercial archaeologists go and work as consultants and vice versa. Consultants in general tend to do more in-office work. So they're writing reports, they're researching sites, but they do go out into the field to do things like field walking or site visits, and they don't do much actual digging at that point in time, which means it's actually quite a popular career for people who are looking to move out of the field but not leave archaeology completely. You can go straight into consultancy rather than being a commercial or professional archaeologist first. So there's quite a few companies that do graduate programs for consultants, so you just have to look for those entry-level positions. But as the title would imply, those are looking for people who have graduated from a university with a degree in archaeology. So it's not as accessible for people who are just looking to get into archaeology but haven't gone to school yet. Professional archaeologists often work in close tandem with our next job on my list, which are local authority / national heritage body archaeologists. These people are usually employed by either the government, a local council, something like Historic Environment Scotland or CADU in Wales or Historic England. And basically speaking, their job is to protect the archaeological and heritage assets that fall within their jurisdiction. They will usually be involved during the planning application process for a development. So basically what has to be done in order for a development to be able to pursue their project and build things. They not only advise on what's needed, but then they also check to make sure that that has been done, so that people can't just say, oh yeah, I dug there and we found nothing. They're the ones who check to make sure that that's actually true. For example, if a developer wanted to build a bunch of houses in the middle of Edinburgh, they would submit a planning application to do that, and the local archaeologist would look at that planning application and say, hey, this is the middle of Edinburgh. It's been occupied for a very long time. So this person, in order to build their housing development, has to employ archaeologists to excavate and record and examine the site and either determine that no archaeology is there or properly record and remove the archaeology in order for the development to commence. This kind of thing will then be put into the planning conditions, so the conditions that the developer needs to uphold in order to proceed with their development. So what will happen is they then hire the professional / commercial archaeologist to come and do their job. And usually during the excavation, especially if something interesting has been found, the local archaeologist or curator, as they're sometimes called, will usually do maybe 1 or 2 site visits during the excavation to make sure that everything's being done according to their specifications. And then once the project finishes and the report is submitted, they also have to sign off on that as well. The report shows that about 650 people work either advising planning bodies or for national heritage bodies within the UK. To my knowledge, local authority / curator archaeologists start off working in commercial / professional archaeology, and then once they've gotten to a certain point, they then cross over. It's not a job that, to my knowledge, you can walk into when you freshly graduated from university or if you're just starting out. This is because they need you to have enough experience to know what you're looking for, to know what's being done properly. You also have to know a certain amount about the planning system, how it works, the laws surrounding it, and how the whole thing kind of comes together. So that's just not something that they teach you in university. That's something that you gain by working on projects. It is a very high responsibility job. You are essentially looking after the archaeology and ensuring that it's not being destroyed inadvertently. Next, we have community / public archaeologists, who, as their name would imply, work to help engage the public with archaeology and archaeological projects. They can sometimes work for charity bodies, but they do sometimes work for commercial companies as well. There are about 250 public archaeologists working in the UK at the moment. They have quite a crossover with commercial archaeology, and it's only going to become more so because there is this increasing trend where developers are required as a part of their planning for their projects to do a certain amount of social responsibility and sustainability initiatives. So they have to kind of give back to the community, and one of the ways that they like to do this is through archaeological projects. So they run community events and digs and stuff like that. And so this is why community archaeologists are increasingly getting hired by commercial companies to help run those kinds of things for their clients. And in order to do this job, I would say that you usually would need to have a good amount of experience digging and running projects of a certain level in the UK, because you need to be able to manage the volunteers, and you also need to still make sure that the archaeology is being done properly. And this is also a job where I would say you probably have to have some experience either in doing commercial archaeology, maybe on the side as a volunteer thing. Working with children is something you need to be able to do. Perhaps like setting up and running events, and experience in doing that kind of thing is quite valuable. This is actually a job that I've heard a lot of students say that they would love to get into. They would love to work on community archaeology projects, and it does sound like quite fun, but it's not something that I would consider to be entry level because of the amount of experience that you need to be able to kind of like run these kind of initiatives. But it is something that you can kind of work up to. In terms of pay, it's kind of middle of the pack depending on if you're working for, you know, like a commercial archaeology firm and what level they consider that work, or if you're working for like a charitable body that is dependent on like grant funding and or donations to fund their projects and what's going on. So there are less jobs available in it, and the pay is not going to be as high as somewhere like commercial archaeology or say like academia. It's not a job for you if you don't like socializing or if you don't like being around people, because it often requires you to kind of be the face of a project when you're at an event talking to the public about what's going on. So you need to be comfortable speaking in front of an audience and interacting with people and talking about archaeology. Our next two jobs are the ones that I think most people like envision when they think of what it means to be an archaeologist, which is museums and academia. I've covered academia before, as I said in the beginning, but for a brief recap, these are people who work for universities or like higher learning institutions, usually teaching and or researching archaeology. There are about 850 people working in academia in the UK, so they are the second highest kind of cohort. These jobs are hard to get. There is really no tiptoeing around that fact. And this is for two reasons. They have quite high entry requirements, so things you need to get the job, and as well, they are becoming increasingly scarce as universities, Sheffield, are cutting budgets and positions across these departments and expecting their remaining staff to do the same or more with less and less resource, which also I think has contributed to quite a lot of burnout from people that do academic archaeology or that work in academia. That means that in addition to having their high entry requirements, there is a lot of competition for these jobs. More and more people are getting masters, more and more people are getting PhDs, and a lot of people want to work in universities and be lecturers and have that kind of job. So in order to get these jobs, you really, I think, do have to end up being the cream of the crop, and you have to work really hard to get them. To work in academia, you need at minimum a PhD, and depending on the job, you might also have to have a few postdoctoral positions under your belt as well. Someone who is a postdoctoral researcher is someone that is working at like a university and they are attached to a specific project that has funding, but usually it's only for a set period of time. So sometimes they're a year, sometimes they're 2 years, sometimes they're 3 years, but they are temporary. They're not usually permanent positions. They do sometimes involve teaching, but they are largely about a research project and doing a research project for a university that involves publishing it and probably going out into the field and doing some field work, etc. A lot of people end up doing postdocs after they finish their PhDs and are usually working towards getting a more permanent lecturing position at a specific university. Lecturers/professors, as many of you will know, are attached to universities in order to teach students, which is only one aspect of their job. They are also often expected to work on and publish their own research in order to, you know, boost the profile of the university. They might have other positions within the university as well. And the more senior lecturers are the ones who also, in addition to teaching and researching, will be expected to supervise master's and PhD students. People who work in academia often go out into the field maybe like a couple times or like once or twice a year. They might bring some students with them on field school to teach and train them in archaeological techniques, but most of the year they are teaching. These jobs can be quite high paying, especially because, you know, they expect you to have a PhD, so there's a certain amount of salary that usually gets attached to those kinds of level of positions. but as I said, they require you to work extremely hard in order to get them, and there just aren't enough of them for everyone who wants them. There is some intersection between commercial and academic archaeologists. I also know like a lot of people who went and got a PhD, maybe tried working in academia and then left to go work in commercial archaeology, or the other way around. They started off in commercial and then they left and went to pursue a career in academic archaeology. There is a lot more mixing between the two than I think people would expect. And by no means are you limited to doing one or the other. I have interviewed my friend Dr. Andrew Danielson, as well as my old professor, Dr. P.M. Michelle Davio, about their journeys as academic archaeologists. Andrew's just starting out. Dr. Davio is a professor emeritus, so she's like peak academic archaeologist. Their videos are linked here and in the description box down below if you'd like to learn more about their journeys and what academic archaeology is like. Okay, so last we have museum archaeologists, and there are about 175 of them in the UK. So they're actually the smallest kind of like cohort of working archaeologists in the UK. Their title is kind of self-explanatory. They work in museums. They're probably either like a curator or they're a researcher working on a specific project related to a collection. Sometimes they have permanent positions and sometimes they have temporary positions attached to like a specific project. I would say out of all of these ones that I've talked about today, they're probably the hardest ones to get, and I think that that's demonstrated partially by the amount of people working in them. There's just not a lot of them available, and similar to academia, they do tend to have quite high entry requirement, like an extensive amount of experience, usually voluntary, working in museums or with collections, as well as higher education qualifications like masters and PhDs. So I would say that they usually want you to have at least a master's, if not a PhD, in a field relating to museums and what they do in some way. So that could be something like conservation, finds in particular, museum studies. There are people who do PhDs and masters in museum studies, or in something that is specifically relevant to the collection you'd be working with. So if you want to work in a museum about ancient Egypt, they would expect you to have qualifications in Egyptology. As far as I'm aware, unless you're at the top of the ladder, they don't pay particularly well, and they often have part-time positions, and a lot of this is due to things like similar to academia, where they have like either budget or funding cuts, so they just can't afford to have more people, which is why they often rely a lot on volunteer experience. So if you really want to get into a museum, you need to volunteer, and you need to be able to afford to give your time for volunteering. Two of my friends who I've interviewed in my Ask an Archaeologist series, Jeanette Plummer-Sayers and Dr. Stephanie Boonstra, are both either working or have worked in museums. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can watch their videos, which are linked here and in the description box below. That's it for today, guys. This has been a long one, but I obviously had a lot to say on the subject, and I wanted to try and be as quick but thorough as possible. I hope that you enjoyed this video and have learned something useful to help guide you on your personal archaeological journey. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please put them down below, as I'm happy to try and answer as many questions as I can. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and or to subscribe to see more videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye!